get into it. Amy, feel free to share your screen and we can dive right into CAC.
Let's do it. I'm gonna go with the slideshow. Okay. Can everybody see my screen?
Yep, looks great.
I'm gonna minimize this here. It's sad because I can't see your face anymore, Maddie, but feel free to interrupt me. Everyone, this is I envision this as being very interactive. And so any hands raised or comments or questions, like please stop us and let's talk about it. Okay, so we did the title slide. Um, but so something that you should know about me, other than having 20 years in tech sales and lead inbound flow design and ex Thomson Reuters, used to work for Westlaw on the court data team, so lots of experience in the space. But something you should know about me is I will jump at every single chance to include a picture of my angel baby in whatever I'm talking about. And so this is Lola, blood of my blood. And it's, you guys are lucky today because this picture or the story that I'm about to tell actually has to do with what we're talking about. And so this past weekend, actually Friday night, I noticed that Lola was uncomfortable, right? She was shaking her head and like couldn't get comfortable moving around. And then once the yelping started, I was like, oh my gosh. So I go and I peek in her ears, and sure enough, one of them was like really red and angry and ugly. And so it was already past the vet is closed. So we got through the night. First thing in the morning, I called the vet, was able to schedule a visit, and we got in there. And so while we're doing the consultation, the first thing that the vet noticed was that the last time that Lola had an ear infection, right? And even though she's a King Charles Cavalier, and ear infections are kind of a thing for this breed, it's not for Lola. But the last time that we had an infection was in the springtime, right? And so the first thing we were able to deduce from the, let's say, her chart or the data was that the source of this ear infection was most likely from allergies. The second thing, that the question that was posed to me by the vet was, do you want, and actually I'm going to stop sharing here. I'm going to come back and look at us. Do you want for us to run a test on like what type of bacteria or what type of infection that this is? And they're like, it's going to be an extra $100. And I was like, I want to know, right? I want to know if we're dealing with yeast. I want to know if we're dealing with bacteria. And so, yeah, let's do the test. And so sure enough, they did the test. And they were able to come back, and shocker, it was both, right? Yeast and bacteria. So we knew which medication to go with. I knew that she's at risk for both, so I'll never know for sure. But the biggest thing that this test turned out for us was that she also had an ear infection in her other ear, right? That had no signs. There was no like soreness, it was like whatever. And so because we did this test, and because I had this information, what we were able to do was collapse the, let's call it, treatment and recovery time, right, in half. Meaning I would have gone through that whole 2-week process of medicine and 30 minutes ear cleaning, adding the medicine, all the discomfort. And as soon as we finished treating the first one, the second one would have showed up. And so because we had that information, not only did we decrease the amount of time that like I needed to spend dealing with this crap in half, right? But also like this speaks nothing to the discomfort that we were able to save. Hold on, let me go back to share so you can have this visual as we talk about this angel puppy. We were able to save Lola, right, by having the data to make smart decisions about her treatment. Now, what does this have to do with CAC or our talk today, right? All data is, right, it's a diagnostic tool for us to make smart decisions about our business. Right. And so sometimes it's annoying to calculate, sometimes, especially if we don't have systems to do so automatically. However, it is worth it because, again, it allows us to make decisions once instead of having to go back and do things over and over and over again until we figure out what works. Okay, so before we dive in here, I'm curious, and you guys can just drop, guys and gals, can just drop your answers in the chat. And Maddie, if you want to read these off as we go, what are you most interested to learn about today? Right? What about the description was it that jumped out? I'm going to keep going. But in my best Simon Sinek, or channeling my best Simon Sinek, we're going to start with why, right? Oh, I see. I had comment here. What? Oh, that's you, Maddy. Okay, we're going to start with why. And so there are 4 big reasons why we want to get a hold of our proxies, our data. And the first one is to gauge efficiency, right? We want to gauge the efficiency of our client acquisition process comparatively so that we know if we are doing it well, how much time we're spending comparatively, and where are there places to obviously improve, which kind of slips into 3. The second one is when we're tracking our intake, right, at this level, we're able to compare acquisition channels, meaning I can look at where our leads and where our clients are coming from and make choices about how to invest time there. We're going to talk more about this. The third big one is it allows us to address leaks in the funnel, right? And so once we're looking at our conversions from leads to potential clients to engagement letters received or retainers paid, we're able to spot where those breakdowns are and focus our attention to address in those places. And the fourth reason about why we should care about our metrics, or specifically customer acquisition cost, is it serves as a proxy for the client experience as well as the employee experience, right? If you've got anybody manning intake. And what I mean by that is if we're looking at our turnaround times or our velocity, maybe that's not and it's long, maybe it's 10 business days to go from initial inquiry to consultation schedule, just as one example. That doesn't ring great client experience. And so when we see the numbers and when we're looking at the numbers, we can gauge where our client experience and employee experience, let's call it benchmarks, are as well. Okay. Everybody with me so far? I'm not seeing pictures, so we're good? Okay, good. So let's start with the breakdown of what client acquisition is and the calculation and how to calculate it. So client acquisition cost is just a division number. So you want to look at your total number of acquisition costs, or excuse me, your total acquisition dollars, right? So the money that you spend and the time that you spend to acquire clients. And we are going to put a dollar amount on that in a second. And then you divide that by the number of new clients that you acquired during a given period. And now what does that look like? So let's say we're spending $7,000, including marketing, tech, and the labor, right, to get new clients. And that 7,000 yields us 10 new clients. That means our our client acquisition cost is $700. But Amy, like, that's all well and good, but like, what does that tell me about my business, right? If that's my client acquisition cost, what does good look like, or what does great? So a healthy client acquisition cost is going to fall within that 15 to 30% spread, right? And so that instance where you've got somebody that's let me go this way. In order to utilize this ratio, this spread, right, $700, you need to have an idea of what your average revenue per client looks like. So if I am spending, or if my client acquisition cost, my CAC is 700, and my average revenue per client is 5,000, that's great. I'm well under that 15%, and that is a healthy range. Everybody with me?
Yep.
Good. So there's that healthy range again. Now let's go a little bit deeper into how to calculate CAC, specifically the cost. So there are 3 categories of cost. And this is how I want you to think about it, like a 3-legged stool. The first is the marketing spend. And again, you want to think of each of these as time and money. It's what you're spending in dollars and it's what you're spending in time. The second are the tools and technology that are being invested, that are being applied to actually acquire those customers. And then the third is the internal labor, right? So it's marketing spend, it's tools and technology, and it's internal labor. Again, the time and money is what's built into the cost. So I want you to think about, before we go further, like, what type of marketing are we actually doing, right? So think about that in your head. Like, what would you qualify as a marketing tactic, and how often are you doing it? So now let's say we wanted to go about gathering the cost of our marketing spend. What does that include? Now, I listed some things on here and I'm going to go through these. Number one is the most obvious. These are your ad cost. This is anywhere that you're spending ads. This could be Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, billboards, TV, right? Ad spend. Number two, website management. Maybe this is somebody that you had create the website in the first place. Maybe part of your managed services fee for an IT consultant that you're paying is also managing the overhead on the website. This is any SEO vendors to help you identify keywords and implement them. Same thing with social media vendors, maybe to do the posting itself. Content creation contractors. Maybe you've got somebody or have hired a ghostwriter for posting on LinkedIn. I would put the screening services like Smith.ai into this category. Training courses. This is one that people like are really dropping the ball on, in my opinion. But any kind of investment that you're making into yourself to get better at doing any of the above would also count as marketing spend. Podcast booking services, right? Some people, I think if you think about where clients are, where potential clients are hanging out or where they go to learn, podcasts is absolutely one of them. And so there are people that will hire an agency to help put them on shows that that their potential clients already listen to. Conference, tickets and travel, right? This is another one. Gifts or incentive programs for referral partners, right? Maybe you're sending a Amazon gift card or a Starbucks gift card for anybody that sends you a referrals. Marketing spend, right? Now, something to note, actually, I want to go back to when you're calculating cost. What you want to do is you want to pick a period of time that you're going to look at, right? And so the two big ones are like, I'm going to look at for the quarter or I'm going to look at for the year, right? When you get too granular, like on a monthly basis, it's not a great distribution, or it's not a great reflection of what that true cost is. So as you're gathering these numbers, or you're even thinking about starting to gather these numbers, right? You want to benchmark which time period you're going to look at. Okay. Any questions about marketing spend before I continue?
No, very
No?
clear.
Okay, good. Next up, software and tools. I put our faces back on here. Software and tools. Gosh, this could be anything or everything that you use to touch client acquisition. Fathom is another big one. I had a client that is using Fathom for a note taker, and ahead of the call, like sent the consent form. Do you consent to being recorded? But Fathom takes notes, right? And often will integrate into where you need or want it to go. Same thing with obviously Smith.ai does a great job of gathering this information and inputting into your system or your tools. Calendly for schedules, your CRM system, right? Clio Grow, if you're using that to manage your intake process, anything for lead tracking, Wix, website, that cost goes in here. Google Workspace, Microsoft Exchange, if you're emailing with clients. You get the idea. Chat tools, forums, call handling. RingCentral is one that comes up, but you want to gather the number of the spend, right? And so in this instance, let's say this person or this hypothetical firm is spending $1,500 per quarter on the software and tools. Again, let's go this way. 3,000 was the total in this example for marketing spend. 1,500 for tools. And then internal labor. This is the doozy. This is where like I see firms really underestimate the time that they're spending. But it's important, right? This is the time that you're investing, and that time has value. And so you want to look at how many hours are being spent on consultation calls or screening calls or emailing with potential clients, attending conferences, speaking at events, digital or otherwise, writing blog posts, right? Even sometimes spending time searching for notes or searching for emails, but maybe from the screening conversation to the handoff. That is all time spent in order to facilitate the handoff process. Obviously, the consultations are a little bit easier to gauge, like in an hour, right? If you've got a billing rate. You can apply that number. Same thing if you've got someone handling like an intake specialist, you can look at their salary, right? That also goes into this process. But one of the ways that I've seen clients try to get a handle on this number ahead of fixing it is they will or can assign a billing number for business development or a potential client intake acquisition. And so that is after a month of just like tracking that time, you can apply that number to this calculation as well. And I put a third bullet on here for the mental load. And this one is like tricky because it's like, I don't know if anybody's been a part of the mental load conversations when it comes to like relationships, right? And how do you have conversations about it? And how do you talk about all the orchestration that goes on in your brain to manage a household, right? In this instance, but we can absolutely apply that logic to the client intake process. And you guys and gals know this already because this is that never ending checklist in your head of, did I return that email? Did I schedule that consultation? Who do I need to follow up with? Who needs an engagement letter? You know, so all the hoops and mental gymnastics that we need to jump through. And then if we wanted to get really particular, we could add on to like the context switching, right? They say when you get into flows, like you really bang it out in 90 minutes, but every time your brain interrupts you with, oh my gosh, I need to do that thing, you need to work that much harder to get back to the place where you were on whatever task that you were filling out, right? And so not it doesn't make it easier to calculate or assign a number, but like these things are very real and we are getting closer at like being able to calculate them, but understand these are all costs, albeit priceless, right? In this instance of like the labor that goes into managing this process, right? I know that was a lot. It certainly doesn't make it or feel less complex, but this is where we come up with the number for the internal labor and go with it. Okay. And then once again, let's look at that calculation. We've got our CAC. So total cost, right? What are the three again? It's the marketing spend, it's the tools and technology, and it's our internal labor. And then we divide that by the number of new clients. In this instance, we had the 3,000 on the marketing, 1,500 on the tools, and 2,500 on the internal time. 7,000 total. Let's say we brought on 10 new clients. That means our CAC is at 700. Make sense? Right? And again, to what do we do with this number? Once we have it, we look at our average revenue per client. And like technically they want like that first annual value. And so I don't know if there's like add-on services that people buy. It depends on what types of matters or what type of work you do and what kind of like repeat client scenario you have going on. But for our purposes, like you could just do the initial revenue. Either way, you want to be in that 15 to 30% range. That's healthy, right? And you know, it also matters based on your tactics, right? So I would expect to see somebody that is heavy on the ad spend. Maybe they're just getting started, right? That CAC is going to be a little bit higher versus the referrals where you want to be, but you're maybe sending off that gift card and it's nice and lovely and it's less expensive than, you know, paying for ads. Same thing with traveling for conferences, right? Everybody with me?
Yeah, and Amy, actually, that's a really great example, you know, traveling for conferences versus paying for an ad. The payback window is a lot different, right? You're going to schedule a meeting, you're going to have that conversation once everyone gets home. You know, it might be, you know, a 30-day sales cycle. It might be even longer for certain deals that you're working on, certain opportunities. So, you know, how do you think about the window that you're looking through for this period for CAC? You mentioned quarterly here. It obviously has to do somewhat with your deal cycle, but also about the spend and when you can expect the return from that. Do you see that varying between clients? Are any of them looking on a monthly or, you know, 6-month basis, something other than a quarter?
Yeah, it's such a great question. Personally, when I work with clients, we're looking at the year. And this even is before like intake Amy, when I used to be in sales enablement, which is the term in tech for the department that creates processes, content, internal and external, and training and coaching for tech salespeople. I mention that because like I have a vivid memory of a conversation with our VP of sales that we were looking at contract time, like the turnaround time for contracting phase. And he was like, well, we don't have this data. Like, we'll never be able to benchmark like what we're how much time we're spending on this. I'm like, well, we can. And I already did because we went through and gathered it. What I mean to say is that I go through the process of like, let's look at everything for a year. So we're doing exports from Wix, right? All the leads that came through. We're manually, if it's a form of some kind, I'm doing an export of like the internal form where we actually inputted the client information. I want to see that. I want to see the dates. I'm looking at when we sent the engagement letter, and I'm also looking at when the retainer was paid. Because I know how to do that, gather that information manually, and like lead a group of people to also fill in the blanks. I just personally, I like to look at the total year. Then we can really start to have just a more meaningful conversation about both the types of matters that we're doing, the lead sources, and the spend. And so it does, maybe that's not the answer that people want to hear, but for me, it's better data and it's faster than most people assume than trying to like pull it together manually. But again, if you're looking at like I've had like I don't know 40 clients last year, like go pull them all, go pull them all, go see what's happening. What about you, Maddie? How do you do it?
Well, we do it monthly actually because we're maniacs, but we also see the benefit in just having a rough idea of where we're at, and also we do it by cohort. So, if folks don't know what that means, basically leads who are coming in a given month align with the spend of that month, but they might pay us back in a later month because that's when they make a payment or subscribe, etc. So we want to track not just what is the current status for that same month as a snapshot, but also what happens in future months because, and I'm sure that everyone on this call has experienced this, you meet someone at a conference or an event, an elevator, someone replies to your ad, they're excited, they show interest, and then life gets in the way or work gets in the way or the conversation falls off or the partner that they're working with is not necessarily engaged to the same extent. And it ends up being a period of time until they finally convert. Maybe your nurture emails are really fantastic, whatever it is, and you bring them back to the table and then they close. It may be a month, 2 months, 3 months, etc. But what we end up seeing for certain types of businesses is that there's actually 80% of the total revenue that's going to comes in the first 2 months, and then another, 19.9% comes in the next 2 months after that. So within 4 months, you've got 99.9% of the business that's going to come in, something along those lines. So you can see, okay, if I'm tracking at this rate after month one, then I can predict what months 2, 3, and 4 are going to look like if I know that they follow that same 80-20 model. And that can help you understand that even though you've only gotten X revenue in the first month, you're not going to calculate CAC based on that because there's another, at least 30-40% of revenue that's coming in months 2, 3, and 4, right? So you're not going to calculate your CAC until the end of month 4, and you're going to use that cohort to be the basis for the leads that then generated the new clients and that revenue.
Yeah, it's such a great point you make. And I like to clarify my answer on the year. We do that to benchmark, right? Exactly. So that we have that bird's eye view of and giving everything enough time to kind of funnel through. But when it comes to managing the process moving forward, I like real-time information, right? So part of it is like you set up this data and your system in a way that you can do some tweaks with your filtering and see where everything is at right now immediately. But yeah, Maddie makes a great point. Like quarterly is it's this one is hard to do on a monthly basis. And I also think another factor is what do you plan Like, what are you solving for, right? What is your problem statement? What are you looking to solve for? And then there's different ways that you can apply the data, which is actually a perfect transition to my next slide, which is a discussion. Like, if anybody wants to weigh in on, like, in the chat, but what does CAC have to do with intake? Does anybody have any guesses? I'm going to give you each give everybody a time. And Maddy, I'm coming to you first on this one, so like, be ready. And oh my God, stay off mute. Like, let's have a conversation.
All right.
Yeah.
While we wait for
While we
folks,
wait, what do you think, Maddy?
well, I think it has everything to do with intake, but it really depends on what your business goals are, how you approach intake and CAC, exactly to the point that you were just making in that moment prior, which is, we've seen a lot of businesses that are in different stages of growth. And some are just hanging their shingle, just getting started. Others are running very mature, multi-generational businesses that can be more choosy. So what does intake have to do with CAC? Well, to me, what I see on a daily basis with the clients we work with at Smith.ai is that intake can be a wide screen or a fine screen, right? So if you're getting a lot of noise, you've opened up a lot of channels. Maybe it feels noisy because you used to get referrals and now you're paying for ads, and now your SEO is driving organic leads to your website who are calling and chatting in, filling out your web forms. Well, you're going to get some unqualified leads. So do you want to have every conversation that's, willing to talk to you? Possibly. That would be a pretty wide mesh net that you're putting out there in the ocean, right? And the other side of the spectrum is you've got a very fine mesh funnel, right? And you just want to pass that tomato pulp through it, and everything else is going to be left behind, right? Now, you can do that when you're running a really mature business. You're very picky. You only want to work with certain clients. And you can do so because you have a strong referral base, or each client is worth such a high ticket that you don't have to be so concerned with getting all the fish in the sea. If you just get a few, that's going to pay the bills. So you can be really choosy, and maybe that's your specialty, and that's where you really want to focus your time and attention. So there may be times when the intake questions are very brief and it's more just data capture and not so much qualification. And there are other times where it's quite rigorous. And if you don't go through the entire decision tree, then you don't pass go. You get referred out to another firm or business. You get, thank you, sorry, but we can't help you, in whatever version that takes. And that is really up to you and what business growth stage and what mindset you're in and approaching new business. Now, obviously, if you're advertising, you cannot narrow audiences to such an extent, because typically you end up paying so much for those leads that it's cost prohibitive. So the reality is that we fall somewhere in the middle.
Yay. Okay. I love it. Jesse, I saw your comment, and we're gonna read it here. Jesse, how do you ensure an accurate figure for staff time on intake? It seems like it could affect the calculation considerably, but also so much gray area in how this variable might change. Could not agree more. And it's a perfect question into how I think about intake, or what intake has to do with CAC. And if I had to sum this slide up into a sentence, I would say, if marketing brings leads in the door, intake is how well you convert them. Right. And so lots of different variables, including skill level, and like measuring time of people. And Jesse, I am going to come back to your question here, but like, let's just look at how much variation there is on those conversions and how well we do convert. So let's say we're looking at two firms, right? Firm A and firm B. Everything is identical except for the number of new clients that they bring in, right? So same costs, same qualified leads generated. Firm A converts into 15 new clients. Oh, I flipped these backwards, my firm A and firm B. I'm looking at the next slide. Okay, so don't judge me there. But firm A converts really well, and firm B, not so much. Wrong button. Again, I flipped these, but big difference, right? And so again, CAC, if marketing brings leads in the door, intake is how well you convert them. And so obviously I'm interpreting or defining intake as client acquisition plus like the physical process of intaking a potential client, right? And so it's almost like that pipeline. But again, how well you convert has everything to do with it. And so, like, what this says to me is, like, or it's my experience, been my experience that most firms will think about, like, if there's not enough clients coming through the door, if there's not enough revenue, I'm not making enough money yet. We're looking at increasing the volume of leads that's coming in, when instead it would better behoove us to look at what we're doing during that process and maxing out our conversions from stage to stage, which is literally like the ethos of why I started Intake Amy. That and like helping firm founders create space to, you know, for deep thinking and like whatever, not have to deal with the mental load of all this crap. Okay, other key metrics. Oh, I should say, does that make sense? Jesse, we'll come back to your questions, but
Yeah,
Maddy, did you want to weigh in on that?
I do. I think, perfection is evil in this case, right? So don't let it be that hobgoblin, right? Like what you want is to just get close. Don't get perfection. You'll never get perfection. You'll keep pulling on that thread and there's no sweater that you're going to find, right? It's just a thread endlessly. So how do you get an accurate figure for staff time on intake? You have a couple options. One, you say, I'm just going to take my dedicated intake person and I'm going to take however much it costs me to have that person in that period of time that I'm looking at, and that's my figure. Or you're going to go a level deeper and say, I'm going to spend the next week and I'm going to track their time, or they're going to track their time, and they're going to put down exactly how much time they spend. We all know time tracking tools, right? So they're going to put down exactly how much time they spend on phone calls, on follow-ups, et cetera, doing the job of intake, answering calls, yada, yada. Now, that's not going to be perfect, but it will be a little bit more precise than just the gross number, right?
Yeah.
And you can say, okay, my week is going to be representative of any week, which is another assumption, but that's okay. And we've got accurate data for that 1 week, and we're going to use that to say, well, I'm going to multiply that for the number of weeks in the period that I'm looking at, and that is based on staff time cost, what my cost is for that intake person. And then you might say, well, I also spend time on intake as the business owner, or my other staff person spends time on intake. Well, give your best estimate, but these things change so often that it's going to be a nightmare for you to try and pin that down perfectly. And at the end of the day, there's enough variance that it won't matter. So get close, either do the, easy approach or do the slightly more difficult approach that gives you a better sense of, completing that task. But don't worry so much about, getting every moment of their time accounted for.
Love that. Thank you for that, Maddy. We could check it off the list of having to answer the question afterwards. I'm going to add a middle one though, right? Just in case anybody wants to take that middle road. And that is come up with a list of tasks, right? That fall under intake, right? Just list it out. And then send an email or ask people on your team, hey, roughly how much time what percentage of your time do you spend every week doing these things? Make
Right.
sure that everybody's operating with the same list, right? Which is why you put together the list in the first place. And then just go off of what, like, their rough estimate, and then divide that by, whatever their salary or whatever. You could take it from there. But that is also like a nice, easy way to do it. Again, step one is to come up with the list of tasks that you're including as a part of intake, and then send that, like, just do a group email, send it to everybody that's touching, right? And say, roughly speaking, like, what percentage of your time or how many hours a week do you spend on such and such thing? And that's another way to do it.
I think one of the challenges sometimes with getting too specific is that you don't bake in the real feel of the cost, right? So in reality, if you're going to have an intake person, you are going to have to bake in some time eating lunch, taking breaks, like, sick days and all of that, right? So all of that will just normalize over the course of the entire period you're looking at. But if you just say, I am only paying for these hours then at the end of the day, at the end of the year, you try and add up and account for all your costs. There's going to be a gap because there's going to be the salary you're paying for an X amount of hours a week. And then there's going to be the hours that you've accounted for that intake person that are not going to perfectly add up to the hours in that salaried position, right? So when you have that gap, what are you going to do with it? Well, you're going to put it back into the intake sales bucket, right? So it's going to end up being there anyway.
Mhm. Love it. Well said. Other key metrics, and I'm looking at my notes for this slide, Maddie, and it literally says imperfect tracking beats perfect ignorance, and you don't need to solve everything, just start seeing clearly, right? So we're not looking for perfection. I plus one that one. But also I have like friends, I have so much empathy on how easy it is to not check the numbers, right? Like I get it, I get it. It is easy, but in this instance, I'll refer back to that Lola story. Double the work, double the pain for Lola, right? That's just the decision that we have to make. Okay, so other key metrics. This is my favorite. This has been my favorite for a long time, but it's the win rate. And this is a reflection of the number of new clients acquired divided by the number of potential clients plus new clients, right? Actually, I should have done a plus there. So the number on top is going to be smaller. New clients acquired plus the number of at bats. So it's potential clients plus new clients. And that will give you your win rate. This is a phenomenal proxy for the health of your pipeline and your ability or your team's ability to convert those clients when they do come to you. Right? Again, marketing gets the lead in the door. Intake is how well we convert them, and win rate is how we measure how well we're converting them. Maddie, you're shaking your head. Do you have any?
Yeah, I would be really also mapping out like what are the inputs to my win rate, right? So you might have an intake specialist, you might have Smith.ai who answers screens, right? Books that initial intake meeting. And then the intake specialist goes into more depth. Let's say it's med mal, there's a long intake form, you do things like that, or it's personal injury, you get the retainer signed, etc. And then you have that attorney call. Okay, now there's 3 different steps to getting to the closing call, right? And to moving forward with that case. So what affected the win rate is also a big factor. So you're going to get this number and you're going to know, okay, is that normal for my firm? And you can look back historically and calculate that. You can talk to your peers and ask them. There's a lot of great Facebook groups and people like Amy herself, who can give you some benchmarking, right? As she's doing here. But then the next step that I would be asking is, well, what does that really mean in that win rate? What could I have closed? What shouldn't have been there in the first place that wasn't really qualified? Who bungled the call, who took too long to follow up, who said the wrong thing, who turned someone off, who did all these things, right? And then what are we also doing right that we want to replicate? Maybe there's someone who needs to shadow someone else on the team so they can learn more about those winning habits and behaviors. So that's really why it's so important, because as you build those winning habits and behaviors, then you can affect your acquisition cost.
Yes, +1 on everything, including like once you get into the numbers here, you can look at conversions by attorney. So whoever's doing the consultation and look at who's converting. You can look at by lead source, right? Are the people that are referred to us where there's a higher degree of trust converting better than, I don't know, an ad, just as like,
They
which I
should
would
be.
expect.
Right.
And so it's a phenomenal, you can look at where things are slowing down, like where they are. Did they not, maybe they didn't show up to the consultation and did like we never rescheduled, or there's follow-up opportunities to like tap into. What were you gonna say, Maddie?
Oh, I said, did you pick up the phone, right? Like if you're chasing and you didn't even pick up the phone the first time, then it's going to go way down.
Which speaks to intake velocity, right? Which is the speed, it's the turnaround time of how long that it takes to convert a potential client to a client. Now, why is this an important metric? I mean, think about the last time you bought something. Think about the last time that you talked to a couple people ahead of buying something, maybe, and it doesn't have to be like maybe it's a car, maybe it's a refrigerator, like whatever. But we did our research, we reached out. I don't know, like you get the idea. But for our purposes, we want to pay attention to the amount of time that it's taking from when somebody reaches out to when they officially become a client. So I count this normally in number of days or business days. So I start with the date when they became a client, and then I'll look at the date that they came in, and I'll subtract. This is a formula you can do right in a spreadsheet. And it tells me the amount of days. And so now when you think about why or how is this relevant, it's like momentum. Right? Remember learning about kinetic energy in high school, right? A body in motion stays in motion, a body at rest stays at rest. Like I knew the old science stuff would come in handy at some point. But anyway, it's the same thing with velocity. And so anytime that there's slowness or lags or the client is waiting or we're waiting for whatever reason on them, like that momentum decreases, and it also decreases our likelihood of welcoming this person into the firm as a client. Anything about that, Maddy? Are we ready for the next one?
No, I think, often we call this age, age to first paid date,
Okay.
age to retainer, et cetera. I mean, depending on the industry that you're working in, if you're
Yeah.
not in a law firm, you are in
Yeah.
a service, it might be that you measure two different dates. You measure like date to estimate, right? Like how quickly are we going out to the house to get a roofing estimate or something? And then you might also measure, estimate to close, right? So when did we hand them the estimate, which might not even be the same date that you're on site to write and get details on the estimate. And then you might have that, signature wet on the paper, check in the bank, et cetera, right? Now we're all using digital payments, so it's not so much a check
Yeah.
anymore. But think
Yeah.
about those
What's
different
that?
term periods, right? Yeah, exactly. I had to order checks the other day and I was like, how do I
What do I sign? What do I write? Like, what is
I had
this
to
thing?
actually get on the phone with someone. So think about those intervals that are meaningful, and you can also measure age more granularly there. So let's just take that roofing example. I'm measuring, that initial connect date. So when they became an MQL or qualified lead. And then I'm measuring like that first appointment date with a salesperson. That might be your intake person. It might be, someone who's actually a roofer going out to a home. And then you have the, proposal date, sending out that estimate, statement of work, et cetera. And then you have the payment in hand. And those are really the key intervals where sales makes mistakes, where clients or potential clients go unresponsive. Like that's where Amy is talking about momentum and where it can go off the rails.
It's funny. I just did a storyboard before this, meaning I looked at 12 months of intake data, and I presented to this firm and the management committee, and the intervals that we looked at, it was the initial inquiry speed. So reaching out to when they were first messaged, right, or responded. In this instance, it was like 3 days, which is wild. Yeah, wow, is right. Then it was inquiry to consultation occurred, right? So all the drama that goes back and forth with scheduling, right, and trying to get somebody to show up or following up to schedule, and that was a number. Then the internal metric, their process in the current state was they'd do the consultation and then fill out what we're calling this like jot form, this form, which was a pain in the ass. And it was something that's like 3 weeks, 3 full business weeks from when the consultation was created to when this form was filled out. Anyway, you can start to break it down and really see where things are leaking and prioritize which ones to address first, because we're obviously not boiling the ocean. Okay. Moving on, and the next one, one of my favorites, and this is lead source breakdown, right? This is that dreaded question about how did you hear about us, right? Which can, I don't know, like we all have opinions about that one. However, when we do ask that question and we are able to gauge where they heard about us or where they came from, we're able to, one, look at our results, right? And that Maddy mentioned this one earlier, and she referenced the 80-20 rule, right? Which is, I'm going to assume there's a couple people on here that never heard of the 80-20 rule. The 80-20 rule, also known as Pareto's principle. This is a principle or a law, not a hard and fast law, more like rule of thumb that says that you're going to get 80% of your results from 20% of your inputs, right? I'm going to say that again. You're going to get 80% of your results from 20% of your inputs. In this case, that means you're like this person was getting 80% of their results from referrals, right? These numbers don't line up like this, but actually note to self, I'll change the slide. But it's wild how often this plays out. And now what do we do with this 80-20 rule that once we know where our 20% or things are, and we do two things to answer the question that I just posed to myself. The first thing that we do is we do more of the thing that is work.
I think we lost Amy, but we will get her back. In the meantime, there was a question about what system we use to track leads, especially those coming from social media like Instagram. That was a really great question. Feel free to post in the chat if you have answers to that. What we do is we use Salesforce. Most CRM systems will give you lead source attribution. But if you're talking about specifically not just ads, but instead those systems that actually have comments, right? For example, you're going to want to make sure that there is a person who's responsible for responding to those comments, and those people can input them into the CRM or fill out a form. Hey, Amy.
Okay, so the second thing that we don't do, or that we do once we know what our 20% or activities are, is we stop doing the things that don't work, right? I'm working with a firm right now, and it's wild. It was business development person, and we got into the analytics on the website, and we were looking at the amount of time that's spent on each page, and she saw essentially how many people were not visiting the blog, and she was blown away because she was like, if I told you what percentage of my time that I spend writing blog posts, and just like you could see it on her face, like, oh my gosh, but they're not even being viewed. And so you can start to make really smart decisions about where you spend your time. Lead source breakdown. Okay. Again, I think that I said this before, but most firms think that they need more leads when really we need to do a better job converting the ones that we have, right? It's just a great place to start.
Or even capturing, right? I mean, I think what we see at Smith.ai is that you don't even know what your potential lead volume is, because if you don't answer the phone or you're discarding the after hours or weekend leads, you're not treating them as equals on par with daytime leads. You have no idea what your total lead volume actually is, because you're not connecting with those leads when they're leads, because 5 days later, they're no longer a lead, right? Like they've already chosen a different business.
Exactly right. That is exactly right. Okay, let's see. All right, so this one is like my one and only text heavy slide, but opportunities to improve the intake process. I'm going to move. I just listed them out for us. Like this is a complete reverse slide of like me listing out these are the big problems that I come across, but you want to accelerate your turnaround times from inquiry to consult and consult to engagement completed. Strengthen up follow-up consistency, right? With standardized templates and calendar links, also training, right? There's an etiquette to client communications, right? And it's maybe my roots are showing in like sales and revenue enablement, but there's always places to improve on what we're saying, how we're saying it, and how quickly we're accessing the, let's say, templates to say those things. Oh, I just realized my microphone is all the way over here. Sorry about that. Okay, invest in team training to build skills in screening and email communications. Touched on that. Clarify the intake decision matrix so team members know when and how to escalate or to refer, right? If it's the refer, right, have a database or a way to easily access who we're referring to, who's taking what internally. And I would even add on this one, create feedback loops if you are working with an intake person, so that maybe if there's some instances where they aren't making a decision or they're not making the right decision, make sure you're communicating that back so that as you continue to work with somebody, they're drawing from the lessons learned as they go through this process. I like this one, support emotional resilience during consults to reduce burnout and increase presence. This is going to vary based on the area of law, but let's say I'm working with a firm founder right now who is employee rights, right? Employment law. And so the people but the employees in particular. And so people that are coming to her firm are reliving like these horrific situations often that they're going through at that time. And so just something to be aware of, that there are ways that you can help whoever's doing that screening or consultations to not pick up on that energy during the process. Establish clear naming conventions for leads, potential clients, new clients, and repeat clients. This is another one. Use lead statuses, right? This is another one I see where when we're tracking, maybe we don't, it's active, we've declined, we're referring out. So that's a big one. Implement process tracking tools to see where leads are and who's doing what. Right. And so this is where you can see at any given point, like this is our pipeline and this is how many we have in each stage. And I think Maddy touched on this at the beginning. We can even forecast like this is how much we can expect next month or next quarter based on our standard conversions or win rates. Where are we? Start measuring outcomes like the consult to client conversions, right? Decline to pursue, client decline to pursue, stalled out, and so that's another place where I see where we could really improve on the data and how we're managing the process, right? Track our outcomes. Same thing with lead tracking sources, understand where the best clients are coming from, get good at asking that conversation or asking that question, whether it's on an intake form or a Smith.ai screening person, or it's the individual on the consult. But that data, like there's gold in those hills, those proverbial hills, as they say. And then leverage automation and tools to reduce manual work and improve responsiveness. I think follow up is a great example of here, right? There are things that you can do to manually, or Smith AI, right? Doing the outbound, right? We have this opportunity that came in the door, this lead. And so Smith AI is going to take care of following up and going to get that opportunity back to the table. And I count that as an automation too, as long as it's not somebody
Yeah,
internal, like that
as
falls
long as
into that
it's not
category.
you. Yeah, you involved, then outsourcing and automation are just, two sides of the same coin.
Okay. I'm just looking at our chat here. Victoria,
Oh
do you have
yeah.
time?
I'll give a summary. So we got a message from one person who's joined us who was, asking some questions about social media management and whether it makes sense to dedicate a staff person to managing, responding to those comments and private messages on various channels, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, you name it, TikTok. So my recommendation is to assess the volume and assess the conversion rate, as we've been talking about here today, and then also determine, how much capacity do you have currently with your teams to handle those inbound inquiries, and what systems are you using? Are you using Sprout Social? Do you have those being fed into a system for monitoring, or do you have to individually log into each of these tools? The more shifting, as Amy mentioned earlier, that happens, the more time loss that occurs. So if you can consolidate those streaming into a single channel, such as Sprout Social or something similar, then you can respond to those much more readily. And if it's really just Facebook and Instagram, obviously you can manage those in one, meta channel. But otherwise, you're going to need a tool. And what I would say is, it's pretty rare for a small business to need a dedicated social media manager, especially who's on the sales side. Most of the time, someone who's in sales is responsible for monitoring those. We often see shifts happening. So, you'll take Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and someone else will take Tuesday, Thursday, and you both cover the weekend because volume is lower. As soon as you have, we're talking 75, 100 inquiries a day across all the channels, yeah, you want a dedicated person, right? And you want some automations and some screening by keyword to weed out the tire kickers and things like that. But until you're at that volume, you probably don't need to hire a dedicated person, just because the ROI is typically not there.
Right, right. Okay, I'm gonna plus one on that. So everything Maddie said, and I'm a big fan of the magic that happens in DMs and chat threads on social media. Like massive fan, especially if you've got a large following already. And like if I've been studying like buyer behavior for 15, 17 years now at this point. Like I know I don't look it, but it's been a long time. And the level of uncertainty that people are experiencing, whether it's an individual or a team of people that are buying things, it's like off the charts. Like we don't know what's real anymore, right? We don't know what's real on the news. We don't know what's real. Like, I don't even know if what I feel is real. Like, and I'm not even kidding when I say that. And so the we're solving for certainty, right, during our intake process, and we're also solving for trust. And so the people that are coming to you from your social channels, you have done all of the work, right, to create that content, to post consistently, to grow your audience base, depending on how good you are with like niching and like, is this a relevant audience, or is this like everybody and everyone can just message me? Either way, that channel in particular, I would guess that there's a higher degree of trust earned there. Therefore, less work needs to be applied in order to build that trust during the intake process, or convert those people. And so I would be paying very close attention. Maybe like to Maddie's point, like while you're experimenting, like run an A/B test for a month. Like pay attention to that channel, touch everybody. Maybe you do it yourself for a month, see how many are real, see how many are fake, like how quickly they converted from the chat to filling out an intake form. Like pay attention to that channel, look at those numbers, and then based on how many converts, right? It's that lead source. Where are we? How those convert to compared to the rest of those channels, that will help you, go far and make strong decisions. Also, and this is the last thing I'll say about this, the more time that you spend manning those chat DMs, the more context you'll have in how to train a dedicated person. This is what's working. This is what I say. I show up as a human first, and then I'll ask this question. And so the more that you do that, the more that you'll know either how to train a human being to do that, or how to have some, dare I say, bots who could, I think, do a lot of the heavy lifting on this front at this day and age as well. Okay, cool. I saw another comment or chat come in. Was that very helpful? Good. Thank you, Victoria. All right. And so we got 1 minute left. Everybody, Maddie, that's still in our chat, Maddie and I talked about this or when we were setting up, as a thank you for being present and staying with us this whole time. We are going to raffle off what I call the intake pulse report. This is something that I do with new clients. It's a $2,000 service of let's gather some information about what's happening with customer acquisition, and let's pull together a report, both in what these are the breakdowns, or these are the problem areas, and what to do about it. And so if you're still on this call right now, then you're in for this raffle, and we'll announce who the winner is for a free complimentary intake report coming shortly. Maddie, anything to weigh in on that?
No, do you want me to share the winner?
Oh, you have a winner already?
Yeah, we have
Amazing. Yeah, let's do it.
okay,
Who's our
so
winner?
Jade Lyons. So we will email you, and if anyone else is interested in learning about this intake pulse report, please contact Amy. It's just amy@intakeamy.com, right?
Yeah, here. I got it right
Perfect.
here. And that's anybody that does contact from this webinar. I believe the other thing, Maddie, we talked about was a 20% discount. So you can expect that
Wonderful.
when reaching out as well. And with that, everyone, you can find me on LinkedIn. Like I'm out there. I do these things, but yeah, please don't hesitate to reach out. It was an honor to be here with you in spirit and presence and all that.
Thank you so much, Jade. We will send you an email connecting you and Amy, and really appreciate, Amy, your insights today. Invaluable way to spend the last hour. So if you missed any of this, it will be up on YouTube for the full recording, and wishing you all a wonderful day. Thank you. Take care.
Bye.